Okay, so we're just about ready to begin. So before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Bejigal and Gadigal people, of which UNSW currently resides on, and I pay my respects to all elders past, present, and emerging, and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders with us today in the Zoom call. So hi everyone, welcome to the UNSW Built Environment Careers Development Seminar. We plan to might have more of these, and I am Charles. I'm actually a fourth year architecture student and the current president of the Built Environment Student Association. So with this session, it revolves around career development, and it really doesn't matter if you're a first year to a postgraduate or master's level student, because we'll be talking a lot about built environment disciplines, namely architecture and construction management, and career pathways, industry insights, work experiences from the perspective of the speakers we have today. Just some housekeeping rules for everyone. Well, before I introduce the speakers, please have your microphones and cameras off so we can focus on the speakers. Note down any questions you've got, and because you might have them come up, and you have time to ask our speakers at the very end. And whether or not the speakers will offer up their contact details after this session is over is entirely up to them. So with this format, we have 3 speakers lined up who are at varying stages of their career, and they'll be able to share their career journey. And there'll be a live Q&A session after all their presentations are over. So first up, we've got Associate Professor Reza, who is also the Director of Postgraduate Research at the Faculty of Built Environment. He is also of our construction management stream. So some of you students from the construction management program might have met him already. Second up, we've got Camila So, who's also a UNSW academic and tutor, who's also part of our architecture stream. And lastly, we've got Matthew Hahn, who's actually studying his Masters of Construction Management and has also worked at Lava. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Reza.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome everyone as well. So I'll just open my slide and share it. Share screen. Okay. Yep. So thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity for sharing my experience as well. So my name is Reza Yusyasunindyo. As Charles mentioned, I'm currently the Associate Professor in the Construction Management discipline, also the Director of Postgraduate Research in the faculty. So just a bit of introduction concerning myself. I graduated from my undergraduate is actually in civil engineering before I, in a sense, changed my education into construction management discipline. I graduated from my PhD from the faculty. Actually, I do have some work experience as well in the construction industry because I graduated from civil, so therefore my first job is actually as a structural engineer. But then I shifted my career, I'll tell you later why, into construction management. So I work for Lendlease. As you know, Lendlease is the second largest construction company in Australia. I started as a contract administrator, and then I became site engineer, project engineer, and sustainability champion. And then I moved to Jones Lang LaSalle as a senior project manager. Jones Lang, maybe you have heard the name before. It's actually the second largest real estate company in the world. So currently I'm a full-time academic staff here, and you can see some other hobbies that I normally do. Okay, so let me share a bit of my experience. So these are my projects as a structural engineer. So I design the structures of these office buildings. So basically I received drawings from the architects, and I simply designed the structure. So the structures means the foundations, and then the slabs, the beams, the columns, the shear walls, and so on. So this is what I did as a structural engineer. It's good. It's a good learning experience. So I immediately was requested to design the structure, even though I had no experience previously. So it's a good learning experience. Obviously, I used computer software to design these structures. I guess from my personal experience, working as a structural engineer is a bit monotonous because every day I did the same thing. And every day just myself and a computer. So that's my experience. So therefore I thought, well, it's a bit boring to be honest. So therefore I kind of changed my career to construction management. So therefore I work now in the construction management or in the construction industry. As I said earlier, I started as a contract administrator with Lend-Lease. This is my first project, so the Movenpick Resort and Spa in Thailand. As a contract administrator, I was responsible for, well, obviously for the contract. So say, for example, I need to liaise with the site engineer in terms of releasing payments for the subcontractors. So I need to make sure that what they claim actually align with their progress. When everything is okay, then I prepare the payment certificate for the client, so the client can release the payments to the subcontractors. And then when there are variations, for example, so changes in the work, obviously I need to update the contract as well to reflect the latest, I guess, the latest design or the latest including the latest changes into the contract. It's an interesting experience because there's so many subcontractors involved in this one project. So there were 30 subcontractors, so it can be quite complicated in managing all the documents, the payments, and the contracts concerning these 30 subcontractors. So that's my experience as a contract administrator, and then I became site engineer. Again, this is one of my projects, the Suvarnabhumi International Airport in Thailand. So Lend-Lease at that time was responsible for all the interior work inside the airport. So if you have been to this airport before, you see all the shops inside the airport. It was constructed by Lend-Lease. As a site engineer, I work closely with the site manager. So our team was responsible for one part of the project. So basically, I supported my site manager to ensure that the team can deliver the project based on the objectives in terms of time, cost, quality, and safety. So that's my responsibility as a site engineer. And of course, I need to liaise or coordinate my subcontractors. If they have any design questions, I need to coordinate with the designers and so on. But the main goal is obviously to accomplish project objectives as agreed in the contract with the client. And then I guess before this one, I became project engineer. So site engineer in Lend-Lease was responsible for the construction stage. Project engineer in Lend-Lease was responsible for the design stage. So I worked with the project manager, and then I manage the performance of the designers. And of course, I need to communicate with the clients as well to make sure that the design is according to the client's desire. So that's project engineer. So this project, I was the senior project manager. So in a sense, senior project manager, in terms of activities to be done, is quite similar as a project engineer and site engineer. Just the scope is bigger because project manager should be responsible for the entire project, while maybe site engineer or project engineer just one part of the project. So yeah, so this is one of my projects that I involved in when I was a senior project manager. Okay, so just quickly again from my experience working in the construction industry, the positive aspects, it's dynamic. Like what I said earlier, every day the challenge was different, meeting new people, building my network. So it's quite fun, it's not boring. The money aspect is quite good as well. The salary, to be honest, in the construction industry is quite rewarding, especially if you can climb the corporate ladder And then the tangible outcomes. So at the end of the project, I can show to people, hey, this is my project. The airport is my project. So the outcomes are tangible. So I feel proud when I share my experience and when I show people my project. The negative aspects, long hours. So sometimes working over the weekend. My record was actually 32 hours nonstop without sleeping in the airport project, because I mean, it's really time constrained. The planes will land on a specific date, so we had to complete the project by that time. So long hours can be very stressful as well, because a lot of deadlines. So after completing one part of the project, then another deadline will follow. After this one, another deadline again will follow. So can be quite stressful. Health and safety is another issue. The industry is known for its poor health and safety around the world. In terms of mental health, has been an issue as well. For example, the suicide rate in the construction industry, especially among young people, is actually higher than the national average. So something that the industry still needs to improve. So just the project life cycle, I think you can see, I mean, this is just a normal project life cycle. In the planning stage, the client and the team will need to conduct feasibility study to make sure whether the project is actually, say, for example, profitable or not to be constructed, and the client will make go or no go decision. And then in the design stage, I think most of you should know, first we need to recruit the designers or the consultants, and then they will develop the design drawings. The procurement here, we procure the services of the contractors to build the project based on the design. So we need to invite them to submit the tender documents, and then we need to assess the tenders and then select the best contractor for the job based on their tender documents. And then the construction, like what I shared earlier, we manage the contracts, variations, people management, super important because there's so many people involved, so many stakeholders involved. And obviously the main goals is to achieve project objectives. And then facility management is at the end. Once the project is completed, then the facility management team will come in. They are responsible for managing the facility, basically. So space management, maintenance, ensuring user satisfactions, and doing some refurbishment as needed. So this is typical project life cycle. And in terms of the construction industry in Australia, in my opinion, it's still good with COVID or without COVID. It is the third largest industry in Australia, employing more than 1 million people. Again, a significant industry. It is a national economic priority, even during COVID-19. This is what the Prime Minister said, because again, the scale of the industry is really big. So it keeps the economy floating during the crisis. The demand for green and smart buildings will still support the industry in the future. And again, the infrastructure development is still booming as well in Australia. For example, like the new Sydney airport. And recently I read news about the metro line as well, connecting the new airport with the existing train stations. So in terms of the outlook, in my view, the industry is still doing relatively well despite the crisis that we have at the moment. And then skills shortage, so it means the industry still needs more people enter the industry, because yeah, the construction industry just needs more skilled people to meet the demand of the workforce. The most in-demand construction positions, I think those are typical positions needed in the construction industry, the same like my experience as well. And then in terms of skills, language, literacy, numeracy, self-management is actually very important. So we need to be self-organized in order to manage the complexity in the construction industry, because again, there's so many variables, so many people to be managed. So we need to be able to be self-organized to successfully manage construction projects. Thinking critically. So say, for example, when we make a decision, we need to consider how this decision will affect the other aspects in the project, because all of them are interrelated. So when we change something, one aspect in a project, it will have impacts on other aspects. So we need to be able to think critically and see the interrelationships between these aspects. Problem solving, of course, there's so many conflicts, so many stakeholders, so many project objectives. Sometimes they are against one another. So we need to be able to solve problems on daily basis. Communication skills, managing people, political skill, playing politics are actually super important in the construction industry. Again, the same reason, so many people involved, so many stakeholders involved, and they have different agendas as well. So playing politics, it may sound bad, but actually it's super important in the construction industry, and probably important in other industries as well, but specifically in the construction industry, because there are so many stakeholders involved in one project. And finally, lastly, the use of technology nowadays has become more and more important as well, like BIM, for example, or using drone, or using big data, sensors, and so on. So just lastly, in my position as the Director of Postgraduate Research, I just like to share this one last slide. An opportunity for you. This is not for everyone, I'll say it frankly in the beginning, but this is also an opportunity to increase your skill set so you can compete better as well in the industry. So our faculty offers 3 research degrees: Master of Philosophy, PhD, and practice-based PhD. You can see the simple information concerning each degree. Scholarships are available. The good thing for local students, there are no tuition fees for you to study research degrees. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Reza. Just so everyone knows, Reza is a valued member of our construction management stream, and he's also on our faculty board. So thank you, Reza, for sharing your experiences with construction management. And for everyone with questions, please save them to the end. And now I'll introduce Camila So. If you can, I'll just hand it over to you. Camila?
Right, cool. Thanks, Charles. Thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. And yeah, say hello to everyone as well. I wish I could see you in person. I see a few familiar faces, but I hope you're all doing well. Let me just put my screen up. Hold on a second. Sorry. Let's see. Okay, all right. I hope that people can see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Okay, let me just put it up. All right, so hello. In case you don't know me, my name is Camila, as I said. I'm a postgraduate student here at UNSW. I'm also a tutor, and I'm also, I guess, like a writer in my free time, and I would suppose those skills then translate to the work that I do. So that's just a brief, summary of what I'm about. So I guess, okay, why am I doing this? Like, why is it that, like I'm kind of doing what I do? And I guess one of the reasons is that I've always kind of been someone who was, always asking deeper questions about, like architecture whenever I was learning. So, when I was doing my degree, it was something that I thought, I loved history, I loved writing. And I was always kind of questioning, say, for example, well, why are they kind of showing different, like certain kind of architectures over others? Why, why are certain kind of architects more respected and so forth? And I was always kind of asking those deeper questions. Even the kind of meaning behind design, like, why it is that those architects were designing the way that they were. So I suppose I was always kind of, like being driven to kind of learn more about those things. And I guess I came to realize that I really value the importance of education as well. So, the idea of kind of being able to be equipped to face reality, to be able to think critically, make good judgments about, you know, about kind of life decisions, about architecture especially. And even being able to embrace different perspectives as well that weren't your own. And so I suppose like I've kind of included a couple of figures here that have been influential to my thinking. So this guy at the top, his name is Luigi Giussani. He's someone that I've really been influenced in the way that he's approached education. And the lady at the bottom, I suppose some of you might know, is Jane Jacobs. So yeah, even her way of thinking, you know, the way that, you know, she kind of framed architecture in the sense of, you know, always thinking about the impact that it has on people and the impact it has on people's lives was something that was very influential to me. And that relates to my next point, which is the idea of a person-centered approach. So I was really always kind of driven towards design that was always centered on human behavior, shaping kind of human lives, shaping the way that we interact with each other. And not just kind of in design, but also in the way that we speak about architecture. So I think something that really annoyed me when I was studying is the fact that people would often, you know, when we were talking about buildings, you know, they'd say, oh, well, like, you know, this building like the Sydney Opera House, or like, you know, this modernist building, it's great, but, you know, other people don't understand it. And a lot of kind of normal people will look at that and go, oh, you know, I don't know how I feel about it, but I feel like I can't comment because I'm not an architect. And I'm really against that. I really feel like architecture is built for people, and people have the right to be able to articulate their experiences about why it is that they feel uncomfortable or they love certain buildings. And so I see it as part of my kind of goal in being able to empower people to articulate their own experiences about architecture. And not just doing that among architects and among architecture students, but with other people in the mainstream as well. And so I'll kind of cover a little bit about that and the way that I go about it in my everyday life in the later slides. Oops. So I guess with all these skills in mind, I realized that there were these kind of little elements that were, you know, shaping the way I was, and I suppose has influenced why it is that I've decided to choose research as a career path. So obviously first I was interested in architecture. I loved history and theory, and not just that, but, you know, even kind of philosophy, even kind of, you know, asking those deeper questions about life, about, you know, architecture, about what the way people relate to each other, etc. And I suppose as an architecture student, I felt kind of weird because, you know, even though I obviously like design, I like drawing and so forth, one of my main strengths was really the ability to write. And so when I graduated, I suppose I was always looking for opportunities to be able to live that skill out and to be able to kind of apply that in different ways. And I guess most of all, what I really wanted to do was I really desired to create dialogue, like to create dialogue about architecture in mainstream media, as well as critical dialogue about questioning what it is that we value in architecture, especially in education, in the way that we learn. So then how did these things come together as a career pathway? So my first step, I suppose, was to pursue postgraduate studies. So I'm now a postgraduate student. And part of this has involved, you know, like presenting at conferences as well. So this picture that you see here, this was in Auckland in New Zealand when I was presenting at a conference in 2018. So this picture only exists because my mom forced me to take it. I didn't allow her to come into the conference with me. And so I was like, fine, I will make friends with a random person and make them take a photo of me. So there we go. This photo exists because of that lovely person. So yeah, so conferences, I present at conferences. I also love to go to conferences as well. And I guess I also tutor, as some of you would know. I tutor mostly in architectural history subjects. And I've also been a research assistant on one of the academics here at UNSW. So what that involves is, you know, like helping to research for journals, helping to write the journal article as well. And I also publish. So in terms of publishing, what I mean by that is that I actually kind of write just on my own time, and I'm not usually paid for it actually, just to kind of, you know, write for the ABC, write for friends' blogs and so forth about the events where I see architecture and real life kind of coinciding, the way that people can make sense of those experiences. And that sounds a little bit vague, but I'll explain a little bit about that in a moment when I show you my publications. And the last thing is talks. So the photo that you see at the bottom is actually not me doing karaoke at a pub. It's actually me giving a talk. So this is me giving a talk about beauty, which I was invited to do for a philosophy group. So yeah, so I guess, you know, what I want to say is that even though there's kind of a career pathway, there's very much different ways of living out your passions and different things that can lead towards that you shouldn't underestimate. So I suppose, obviously, as a postgraduate student, I'm doing a thesis. So a little bit about my research. I'm looking at the Sydney Opera House as a post-war monument. So I suppose, you know, obviously as someone who's very interested in meaning and very interested in philosophy, I was really fascinated with looking at the Sydney Opera House and seeing that, you know, it's obviously an icon in Australia. And why is it that it has become that way? And how is it significant to what was happening in the world at the time? So I'm kind of researching, you know, the idea that, you know, post-war, they had certain ideas about architecture, about the kind of democratic and expressive ideals that should have. And also about, you know, like what were the ideas of the public realm at the time? Because obviously, following the world wars, you know, there were kind of the totalitarian regimes of the, you know, and so forth, that were kind of things that were imposing on people, but not necessarily allowing people to express themselves. And so I'm kind of, you know, discovering how the Sydney Opera House was kind of built with those ideals in mind. And with those ideals, in terms of looking into history and what, you know, those kind of ideas were in terms of building the building, I then kind of use those ideas to then understand how we can perceive the Sydney Opera House today, especially in events like, you know, Vivid Festival or things like the concerts. So that's kind of my research, you know, drawing kind of the history of the building as well as in order to understand the present. And this is what I mean by this type of work that I published. So these are two articles that I've published with ABC. So the first one that you see is called Beyond the Lights of Vivid Festival. So this was actually drawn directly from my thesis work. And the reason why I wrote this was because, you know, Vivid Festival was coming up at the time, and I wanted to be able to contribute something to public dialogue in order for people to understand that Vivid Festival wasn't just this, you know, light festival with no meaning, that there was actually a deeper kind of like aspect of public life and the way that we live our lives, like through, you know, like expressing artworks on buildings and, you know, through the way that we allow people to gather in these spaces. And so I thought that I, as an academic, could contribute my understanding to everyday experience, to things that are part of people's reality, by kind of contributing my research, contributing the way that I see things, in order to allow people to think about these things more deeply and to see that there's a deeper meaning behind it. And the second article that you see about COVID-19, so that was something that I actually posted on the anniversary of Notre Dame burning down this year. And what I posted about was about, you know, the fact that, I guess what we're doing now, you know, the fact that we can't even be in person together, the fact that, you know, we don't have kind of separate spaces in order to live our lives, like schools and offices, and what that does to us and why it is that that is so unsettling to us. Because I was, you know, talking to a lot of friends and them saying, I don't understand why I'm feeling this way. I don't understand why it is that, you know, I feel unsettled by the fact that I can't go to my office, I can't go to all these different places. And so as someone who does architectural research, I thought that it was within my capacity to be able to write about that and to be able to help people understand their experiences. So I believe that research isn't just limited to research as a little kind of bubble. I believe that those skills are very much translatable to be able to create, you know, greater dialogue and, you know, be able to help people understand their experiences in real life. So then how did I get here? I thought I'd kind of start from Perth. Yeah, I forgot to mention I'm from Perth. So I studied at the University of Western Australia from 2009, 2013. And then the year after, I worked for architect David Barr. But then in that time, I also began, because I started to, you know, pursue my interest in research by reading a lot more, by kind of asking those questions. And I really wanted to have practical experience in being able to engage with those ideas and see them come to life. And so I actually used that time to present, to help to organize a conference with speakers and so forth. So that's where I'm listed the RLO office. So then that experience then helped me to realize, okay, well, like organizing these talks, you know, seeing the way that people actually benefited from these talks and were really grateful for it and felt like they enriched their lives, that actually helped me to realize, well, ideas aren't just these things that are floating in the air. They can actually have an impact and can actually kind of, enrich people's lives. And so that kind of helped me to realize, okay, perhaps research is something that's worthwhile to pursue. And then the year after, I started working for Tima International. So it's actually my parents' company. They're both interior designers. And to be honest, my work actually extended back from 2015 to, I don't know, from high school when I was helping to stuff pillows in their apartments and arrange flowers and so forth. But so I started working for my parents. I did a lot of work across the board, like admin, going to meetings, in conducting interviews, even little things like writing up contracts, like managing finances and so forth. So that gave me a lot of experience across the board in terms of what to expect in architecture, that it wasn't just about designing buildings, but also about relationships, also about, the kind of admin work behind that. And I guess in that year, I still continued to pursue my interest in research by joining this thing called the Dawson Society. And with that, I started doing something similar to what I was doing with the RLO office, in the sense of organizing talks, kind of organizing things that I'm running events, being emceeing and so forth, flying philosophers over from England and things like that. So those were, again, like tangible kind of experiences that helped me to realize that, a life of ideas was worth pursuing. And so I decided to move to Sydney to be able to pursue my studies. And when I first moved, I spent a few months working for an architect, Sydney Rofe. And then I started tutoring. So then, I started with enabling skills with Paul, and then that kind of expanded to teaching all the history units with first year, second year, third year to masters. So yeah, it was really good that, obviously kind of moving and just taking that one step has then allowed me to have all these other opportunities that I now have, like being a research assistant and helping to coordinate all the online things with the transition to online teaching in Moodle. And I think that's something that I think people shouldn't underestimate, the fact that even in research, even though it's solely kind of thought about as something that's to do with, thinking about your research, your thesis, a lot of it's also about creating a community and finding a community to be able to live your ideas out with. And that's something that I found really enriching in my own life through tutoring. And tutoring has also helped me to, be confident with public speaking. I used to be terrible at public speaking. I'd be so nervous. I'd break down if someone asked me a question I didn't know how to answer. So tutoring has really helped me to equip me with the life skills and also the people skills to be able to, relate to people and to be able to, to kind of manage groups and so forth. So that's a very enriching experience. And I suppose something that I shouldn't miss out on is, as I said before, I did present at a conference in Auckland. So that was in 2018 at the Interstices conference. So yeah, just being able to, during my research, to be able to pursue these opportunities like tutoring, like presenting in conferences, that has then helped me also with my networking and with meeting people. That has helped me to, be able to expand on my research and also to learn a lot more about what's out there in the field. So I thought I'd put this together for you guys because, it's kind of easy to kind of hear about these things and to go, well, where do I begin? I can't just start a thesis straight off. And so I thought I'd give you a breakdown about, the kind of skills that I needed, as well as how you can kind of practically start now as well. So doing research, as I said, is a lot like the design process. It involves the ability to communicate your ideas clearly and the perseverance to continually refine and revisit ideas, knowing that a good design is never an instant solution. So you guys would already know this with Folio, right? With Studio, the fact that you're constantly having to revisit ideas, do, refine sketches, plans, sections, and so forth. It's exactly the same process of research. And I think I can't stress enough the ability to communicate. So communicating, your ideas clearly through, well-chosen words, through well-chosen kind of pictures and concepts and so forth. But communication isn't always just about articulation, about speaking at people. It's also about listening. And so listening then involves the ability to be able to communicate things so that those particular people will be able to understand. And I think something that's unfortunately a downside of research is that, researchers are seen as people who just kind of babble on and use big words and people don't understand them. Well, this is part of kind of that empathy and part of getting in touch with people, asking, okay, like, do you understand what I'm saying? Trying to kind of clarify those things. And I think last of all, what's necessary is being able to develop your confidence in your passions and interests. And I know this probably sounds like something that you take for granted, but it's really something that I struggled with when I first started research. Because you come in, you're young, there's all these, different academics, all these different researchers who are then kind of plummeting you with questions, being like, well, why aren't you researching this? Why aren't you doing this and that? And being able to stand on your own 2 feet and to be like, well, okay, I believe in this. I believe in, like researching this. I believe that this is more important than that. Being able to develop that confidence is so important. And obviously, I feel like I'm not necessarily fully there yet. I'm very much on the way to learning these things and developing myself in these things. But I think these are the skills to keep in mind as you're thinking, if you are thinking about a career in research. And so how would you start these? I think these can only come in practice. So something that's really helped me personally was to find good friends or like-minded people who I could talk to about my passions and ideals. Something that helped me was being able to find opportunities as well to be involved in discussion groups. So being able to facilitate them even better. So stuff like I had a friend who had a philosophy group, so I would go along sometimes and just facilitate sessions on like beauty and architecture. And even just being able to learn how to receive questions, how to be able to explain things to people was really helpful for me. And I wanted to reiterate back on my point about good friends and like-minded people, because something that I found that's been really helpful is especially in developing your confidence, is that sometimes you need people who are just safe people to be able to talk to, who you can actually learn from as well. So people who are role models, for example, who, do the research that you like to do, or who are passionate about what you do. Being able to talk with these people will then give you a sense that what you do believe, what you are passionate about, what you believe in actually matters. And it will give you that confidence to be able to go out into the world and be able to write about those ideas, to speak about those ideas. On a practical sense, research involves a lot of writing, obviously. So one way that we can start to think about how we can articulate ideas better is to find authors and publications who write material that inspires you. You'll start to see that there's a real pattern here. I'm a real believer of role models, of community, because I believe that no man's an island. I believe that, with a lot of writing especially, that you can really grow by looking at the way that people have written about the things that you're passionate about. Being able to learn about the way they've written about it, the way they've used examples, the style of writing that they use, the way that they frame their arguments and so forth. So that's something I suppose that you can start to look into. And then once you get into those authors, you start to find out the people that inspire them. And then that way, there's kind of that chain cycle of, learning from them, learning who inspires them. And then that kind of expands your field of knowledge. So even though those are very kind of little basic things, I think those are kind of little soft skills that you can start to develop. And, even if you don't pursue a degree in research, ultimately those passions can always be translated to other things that you do and will be able to be lived out in a different way. So last of all, this is a picture of me in the Vitro Museum on an elephant in my last year of architecture. So because Charles asked me to, talk to my old self and in the uni and what I would have told them if I was going back 10 years. So I would say, don't be afraid to take further steps to pursue your passions. Fight the fear of uncertainty and how others will perceive you. So I guess the reason why I say this is because I grew up in a household where, I was always told that you have to be practical, that, there's no kind of future in your esoteric ideas and so forth. And so within my actual degree, I didn't actually end up doing my research component in my master's, because I thought, oh, well, that's not going to get me anywhere. And that's just for people who are impractical and who there's not going to be any job opportunities for them. But then I look back and I'm like, well, I think, it's definitely worth pursuing and to kind of take that step into the unknown, especially because you're young, you can kind of afford to do these things. So I definitely think, don't be afraid to pursue that. Don't be afraid of what people will think of you. And yeah, like as I said, even if it doesn't lead you to research, it'll definitely lead you to a more kind of purposeful life where you'll be able to pursue what you want to do. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Right. Thanks, Camilla. So again, if you've got questions related to architectural research or that field or discipline, please save those to the end because Camilla's an expert in that field. And then next up, I'd like to introduce Matthew Hahn, who's a postgrad and also studying masters at construction management at UNSW and has worked as an architectural designer. So Matthew,
hey,
I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks for letting me share my experience tonight. Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Hahn. I have an experience in boilermaking construction, door-to-door sales, and in architectural design. I have a Bachelor in Architecture degree at UTS, and I'm currently studying Master of Construction Project Management here in UNSW. My interests and passion lie in the development of smart and sustainable cities. My background is in the construction and energy generating industry. I started working after high school as an assistant boilermaker engineer. Through technical support for the upgrading and servicing of Airing Power Station in Morisset, near Newcastle. Here's a look inside the power station. The cooling water pumps are critical infrastructure for this power plant, with 6 pumps collectively providing the cooling water to all 4 turbo generators. The pumps run in seawater and require regular maintenance. This is where I would maneuver and crawl inside these turbo generators to assist welders and boilermakers in the removal of equipment and piping related components. Inside this industrial turbine machinery, I developed an interest in construction and the technology used in the built environment. I wanted a deeper understanding of the industry, so I moved back to Sydney and went through TAFE and business courses to get my Bachelor of Architecture degree at UTS. As a graduate architect, I started working as an intern for Lava Architects. The firm uses geometries in nature through data generative algorithms to create 3D parametric designs. My role as an intern was to develop construction drawings and conceptual diagrams for the project's narrative. My role transitioned into the developing conceptual designs for projects using 3D modeling software such as Rhino and Grasshopper. This is the Sydney Story Factory in Parramatta. It was built in 2018. This project transforms a heritage 1830s cottage into a fluid, continuous space for workshops and storytelling. I worked on the development of the construction drawings for this project and saw the finished design at the opening event. This is Van Phu vertical high-rise apartments and offices located in Hanoi, Vietnam. The buildings are designed to maximize views to the new Hanoi Performance Arts Center and are connected by green bridges. I worked on the sustainability analysis to create solutions for controlled high temperature weather and to create public sanctuaries which mediate the microclimate. The terraces are linked to step podium connected by cascading waterfalls over several levels. I was fortunate to travel and work with the company branch team in Vietnam, where I worked on Central Park design. This project won the international competition to design the 16-hectare Central Park in Ho Chi Minh City. The pedestrian pathways merged with the railway tracks built in the 19th century. The sunken gardens enhanced the space by connecting to the underground shopping center, linking to the new metro station. Working with the team, I learned about the changing nature of architecture and the shift towards a greater reliance on digital technologies. Today, I'm moving towards a new field. It has been a long journey to where I am in my current role, from beginning as a construction boilermaker to business courses and working in sales and to architecture. As I'm transitioning into project management, the skills I would need for my future roles will be to execute and maintain management processes in areas of scheduling, quality production, and communication with teams. The built environment is changing. We're currently in the fourth industrial revolution, enabled by a dependence on greater technological advances. At this moment, we're in the slowest stage of development. When this time passes, cities will be evolving rapidly into the post-digital era. So right now, we're in the most prosperous stage of growth, with many experiments and forward-moving failures to identify what works. There is so much potential in the industry of unlocked forms of technology to implement new standards of development. Up until now, the construction industry has remained traditional in the development approach. However, things are changing very quickly. We are now only seeing more technologies being implemented than we have ever seen before. For example, the use of 3D digital twins for structural engineering, lighting performance analysis, for eco-friendly architecture, and building energy consumption. Virtual simulations are another innovation in the built environment. For real-time virtual experiences to gain a deeper understanding of the building space before and during construction. So what would I do if I could go back to the beginning of Bachelor in Architecture? I would really define my goals and objectives. I was so focused on the short term without a real consideration of my long-term objectives. I feel as though I was very unorganized and I did not take care of myself very well. So I would reorient my life in every possible way to make the probability that I will achieve my goals as certain as possible. I will treat myself properly and take care of myself, then extend that courtesy to everyone else, to aim at the highest possible good that I could imagine, and then act it out in the world. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Matthew. If you have questions relating to Matthew and his journey from architecture to construction management, please say it at the end. And then I guess now we'll move on to the next segment, which is the live Q&A. So I'll just make sure I'll drop a link in the Zoom chat box for everyone to see. Just give me a moment. So basically, there was a link that was sent out via Slido, which is a platform we'll be using where you can anonymously send questions to our panel consisting of Reza, Camila, and Matthew, and we'll answer them on the spot. I will share that now. Just check. Yep. So can everyone just access that? And for students in the Zoom call right now, please access that link in the Zoom chat box and drop your questions in there. And I will share screen and show the questions that have been put through already. Oh, can everyone see that? Yep. Okay, so 31 questions by students so far. So again, just the guidelines. So for the speakers, Reza, Camila, and Matthew, we'll be going by that order, and I'll be facilitating these questions and assign who I believe should answer these questions. let's just, well, given the time frame, let's just keep it as direct and as honest as possible. And I think the best way to answer the question is from your own personal experiences rather than going for objective answers. So without further ado, I'll go with the first question. So first question asked by a student is, how would COVID-19 impact the built environment industry as we know it? Can you provide examples, and what does this mean for built environment students? I think, Riza, do you want to start off?
Okay, I think I mentioned briefly in my slide, in terms of the construction industry, I think the industry will still be okay because the demand is still there. The infrastructure still has to be improved and developed. Why Australia, the population is increasing, the infrastructure, to be frank, is not so good. So therefore, the demand is still there in the construction industry. In terms of built environment in general, I think there will be an interesting new field. Say, for example, because of COVID-19, probably we need to consider our office design to minimize the spread of the virus. For example, this is just on top of my head. So I think in terms of built environment, we still should be doing okay because the industry is actually quite big and it is very important for the national economy.
Okay. Camila?
Yeah, so I guess I suppose my industry would be, like the research and architectural history and that. So I suppose COVID has impacted it in the sense that, you're all experiencing the fact that we're all online learning now. There's a lot of kind of, processes to be able to try and change the way that we learn so that it's still interactive, that people are still across the board, that we can still learn as much as possible. And so in that sense, I suppose the way that education would be moving at the moment would be to even though architectural history in itself is not so much of a thriving industry, obviously more of the kind of quantitative jobs like things like sustainability and project management and so forth, and construction would be more kind of I guess desirable fields of research in terms of viability for employment. But with this, with the kind of change in the online teaching, I think there's a lot of room for people to come in and to then kind of be able to create kind of better educational experiences, and to be able to, and there's a real kind of field that's growing in that, which I think is really exciting and something that should be embraced as we're moving forward.
Thanks, Camilla. And Matthew, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just with what I went over with with my slides, I think definitely there'll be a greater emphasis with digital data, digital information. So how the technologies would become more a part of the construction sites and create more of a virtual simulation type scenarios for people to work. I think that could be an impact.
Okay. Thanks, Matthew. Hopefully that's answered that question. Okay, one question that's just shot up. So, honest thoughts on going to become a registered architect. Our lecturer said that the profession is declining in the industry. Riza, would you like to have a go?
Well, I'm not really an architect, so it's a bit hard for me to answer this question. But just a general overview, I think the industry is changing. In the past, the architect is leading the way. They are like the key person in a project. But nowadays, usually design and build is employed to build a project. So therefore, again, this is my perception. The construction manager or project manager plays a more significant role than the architect because just the trend is changing. But in terms of being a registered architect, I can't answer that question.
Okay, fair enough. I'd hand it over to Camilla if you've got any input.
Yeah, I'm thinking perhaps Matthew might be a better person to talk just because it's been a while since I've been practicing. Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Matthew?
Well, in my opinion, I think there will always be a place for architecture. I really believe that although technology advances, I think one thing, art will never perish, never die. So if there's a creative mind, the artist has always the ability to push their ideas forward and to create something new. whether that may be a sculpture or a particular design or a new typology in design, I think there will always be room and there will always be a drive for this type of creative freedom.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Okay, next question. Is it beneficial to work first, then come back for masters? And what's the process? Reza?
A master's like by coursework or research. Okay, anyway, is it beneficial? In my experience, yes. So normally what I did actually, I finished my degree and then I work for a number of years before I continue my study, and then I finish my master again. I work, and then afterwards I completed my PhD. So I think it's good because you can link practice and theory better when you have the work experience. What's the process? Well, I mean, it's just a matter of applying for a position, so it should be quite straightforward. Yeah.
So you would agree with the statement?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Cool. Camila?
Yeah, I think I would agree with the statement as well. So drawing from my own experience, and when I did my first degree, I actually kind of regret that I did my master's full time and just kind of jumped into it straight from my bachelor's. I would have liked to do what I'm doing now, which is working and studying at the same time, particularly for the reasons that Reza has talked about. So the idea that, you know, working kind of gives you that real life experience and that sense of where it is that those skills, how those skills are going to be translated into, you know, professional work and professional life, and, you know, having to kind of work with people and so forth. And I guess like the other side of it is that because I love learning, I just felt like just doing your master's full time, sometimes you just rush through and then you don't really even get to learn or to enjoy what you're really kind of, you know, like learning from the experience. So I think on two parts, so being able to have real life experience and being able to get the most out of your education, I think that working and studying at the same time is a plus.
Okay, thanks, Camila. Well, and Matthew, well, you're already currently doing your master's, so
yeah. From my perspective, I think it really depends. I think it really depends on the person, because everyone has their own objectives and their own goals. And if what you're planning is wanting to finish your education so that you could start working full time, then just doing the master's first would be a good option. But there's also, if you want to start working later or do the master's first, I think that really just depends on the person.
Okay. So Reza says yes, Camila says yes, Matthew says depends. Okay, that answers that. Cool. Okay, question. To what extent have you used LinkedIn to interact with other professionals and generally in your employment? I think this is an open question for all three. So Reza?
A lot. As I said in my presentation, maintaining networks, playing politics are actually very important to build your career in the industry. So yes, I use LinkedIn heavily to share my thoughts or to share my achievement, to share my research and so on. Yeah, I think it's very important to maintain your networks through LinkedIn.
Yeah. Camila?
Yeah, to be really honest, this is only something that I've recently come to realize is important because, you know, as I was sharing before, you know, sometimes I publish kind of articles in ABC and so forth. And actually recently I decided to share it on my LinkedIn. And then I had, you know, this dean from another university contact me being like, oh, this is great work, you know, thank you. And I had like this other person from like Oxford University who now works at Heritage message me as well. So like you never like can predict the type of people who are going to come to contact you. So I definitely think, you know, LinkedIn is definitely important. It's amazing. Yeah. Just to establish those connections, as Reza said.
Perfect. Matthew?
Yeah, I think Reza and Camila really just said it. It's great. Yeah, it's awesome.
Perfect. So that answers that question. The answer to that is they use it heavily and get on it. Okay, cool. So question. Do you think that volunteer and extracurricular experiences are important to employers? Again, I think this is an open question. Reza?
Yes, especially early in your career. Say, for example, if you don't have any work experience, so you really need to bump this extracurricular experience in your CV to show that you are, in a sense, willing to contribute to the society, for example, or to demonstrate your achievements.
Of course. Thanks, Reza. Camila?
Yeah, I think I've already covered some of this in my presentation, but I just wanted to elaborate, and obviously the answer is yes. I just wanted to share a little kind of anecdote. So, the reason why I got one of my first tutoring jobs was because I had experience in the past of, like working with youth conferences, facilitating small groups and so forth. And even just kind of those little skills that I never realized could kind of work for me professionally actually kind of got me my first job. So definitely never ever underestimate the power of volunteer experience to be able to equip you to work and for your future.
Okay, thanks, Camila. Matthew?
Yeah, definitely. I think it really does tell a lot about your character and what other curricular activities you're into. So yeah, it definitely helps with getting your first role.
Okay, answer is a yes, yes, and a yes. Volunteer and extracurricular experiences are important. Okay, good. So, question. How to get into the industry when you have no experience or connections? Well, I guess we briefly touched on this, but Reza?
Well, for construction, for example, I mean, if you open seek.com, there's so many opportunities out there. So just start applying. But before applying, make sure your CV is appropriate. Yeah. So just keep trying, basically. And sometimes cold contacts can work as well. So you can contact the directors directly and just say, honestly, hey, I need a job.
Okay.
Can I try? But again, your CV should be appropriate before you do anything.
Okay. Thanks, Reza. Camila, from your experiences?
Yeah, so I guess with no experience or connections, I suppose like if we were thinking about academia, it's like something that you can start off with is like making connections. So talk to your professors, talk to people who are in fields that are things that you're interested in, and from there, even what I said before, even if you start to make friends or start to kind of find, say for example, like groups that discussion groups or things that or like volunteer kind of experiences where that there'll be people there who kind of have similar interests to you. I think never underestimate those opportunities, because those can very much lead you to employment experiences and other kind of career pathways.
Okay, thank you, Camila. Matthew?
Yeah, it really depends on which industry you're going to. So for instance, in my experience, when I was applying for an architecture role, I really took time and effort in trying to refine my portfolio and just to really make it presentable, so that when the bosses see them, then they'll be more interested in seeing what kind of person I am and would want to meet me. So I think definitely spend a lot of time in the portfolio.
Okay. So answer is refining your CV, resume, portfolio, and cold calling. Okay.
If I can add a bit, I think Camila raised an interesting point. So start building your connections, your professors, even your colleagues or your classmates can become important people in the future. And persistence. I think for Lend-Lease, for example, I applied them 3 times before I was accepted. So just keep pestering them whenever the opportunity is there.
Yep. So building connections and persistence. Thanks, Reza, and thanks, Camila. Yep. So what are skills you must have in architecture? Rendering, sketching, reading plans, etc. Well, I'll just throw this over to Matthew.
So it really depends. I feel like there are a lot of different practices of architecture firms in Sydney, and a lot of firms will be interested in having skills catered around construction drawings or CAD detailing. So usually beginning roles would revolve around these kind of skills. But then as you enter the office, then you can learn other skills and become accustomed to the office and see what other areas can be offered. So I think it really depends in the type of office you go for, and also what your interests are, because you can also be interested in rendering, and there's some firms that are more catered towards the rendering side.
Mm-hmm. Great. Can you just share a little bit about what happens at Lava? Like what's preferred there?
Yeah. So in the office, there's actually two different departments with more of the design side and the graphic rendering side. So the Sydney office is more around the designing. So we have people doing a lot of the designs and just the early stages of designs. And then once the designs have been established and have pushed forward, then we send it over to the renders, and then the renders will spend some time in refining the drawings. And then after that, we will send the models to the detailing team, where they can refine on the construction drawings.
Can I say something as well, Charles?
Yep.
I think to add to what Matthew said, and about the kind of practical design skills. I think something that we often forget, and the first thing that I realized when I started working was that a very big skill that comes in with architecture is the fact that you're not just working as an architect, you're working with teams. So you're working with construction, you're working with project managers, you're working with builders, etc. So a very big skill that a person should learn early on is the skill of negotiation and communication. Like, don't kind of underestimate those kind of personal relationship skills when it comes to your career path.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Camilla. Right, next question. I've noticed there's quite a lot of various software used in industry. Which ones are the most common and most important to learn, and why, architecture-wise? Well, Matthew? I think you mentioned Grasshopper and Rhino, but just elaborate. Yep.
So again, it really depends on the type of office or practice you go into, because I know some offices that are more interested in CAD and Revit because they do a lot of detailing. But then there's other offices that are more design focused. So they use Rhino, Grasshopper, these kinds of 3D generative design programs. So it really depends on the office, in which office you go to.
Okay. Thanks, Matthew. So next question. For architecture, is it all about applying and emailing to all the firms you know of to get an internship or entry-level role? Well, I mean, I'll just open up to anyone. We'll step in.
I think it's the same. It's the same in any industry, just like what we said earlier. Just prepare your documents properly and keep trying.
Yep, I accept that, because I think it's common across everything rather than just architecture. Yep. Oh, this is a good question. Is what we do at university, for example, architecture studio, different to what the industry and practice is like? Camilla?
Oh, I feel like I kind of answered this question already in the sense of the very big difference between university learning and practice is kind of that the idea of working with teams. But I think, I guess something to keep in mind with the university as well is that, I think with, especially with studio, sometimes we think, being an architect is just all about, churning out those drawings and, kind of just the design principles and so forth. But really, those exercises are just more kind of equipping you with the type of thinking that's then kind of appropriate for architecture. So it's just kind of more like the thinking skills, but the kind of practical skills in terms of executing it, in terms of working, negotiating, is something that you'll then kind of live out in real life when you're working. So
Thanks, Camilla. Okay, next question. What do you look for in a recent graduate or student intern? It's a bit vague, but I'll just hand it over to you, Razor.
For me personally, first, the WEM. Because, you have no experience, you have nothing. So that's, in a sense, the minimum indicator. And then again, we discussed earlier, if you have other things that you do out there, voluntary work, extracurricular activities, then that can be your competitive advantage as well. That one just based on the document first, the objective measures in a sense. Interviews, super important. So this is again a way for you to differentiate yourself from other applicants. So you need to be a confidence during the interview. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Reza. I think we touched on this already, but what's it like working at an entry-level architecture role? I heard it's just drawings in CAD. Well, Matthew, I mean, you've got this. What's it like?
Yeah, so it's a lot of detailing, drawings. From my experience, I did a lot of diagrams as well. So a lot of graphic kind of detailing drawings for the office. So from my very early roles, I would get handed down some design ideas, and they would like me to elaborate on how the steps for the designs would evolve and would transition to the final design. So I would say it would be a lot of graphic designs and also a lot of detailing as well. So using CAD or Revit to do construction drawing details.
Okay, cool.
Charles, can I add something as well?
Sure.
I guess from my very limited experience, I guess from working with the architect that I work with when I first graduated, so David Barr, I think something that I'd like to add to what Matthew's already said is that I think something that makes a difference is whether you get work in a big firm or a small firm. I find that, my experience with small firms is that having worked with sole practitioners, I find that they kind of give you a lot more experience across the board. So with David Barr, I was doing things like toilet schedules, picking up, tile samples, doing renderings, kind of even going to clients' houses, taking photographs, like site kind of stuff. So I think like if you work for a smaller firm, obviously you get kind of more opportunities in a sense. But I guess from what I understand with bigger firms, you're often kind of locked into a position and you're kind of, made to kind of do certain tasks repetitively. So yeah, it really depends where you get your job.
Okay, thanks, Emil. Okay, well, Reza, you've got yourself a fan. Hi, Reza. What would be your advice to fresh graduates who want to be a project manager? Most companies are looking at an experienced individual.
Well, I think it's nearly impossible to be a project manager without any experience. So you need to start from obviously lower positions first, cadet, and then again, like from my experience, contract administrator, and then engineer, and then slowly you build your experience, and then you can become project manager. If you want to be a project manager directly, I think it's almost impossible.
Okay, almost impossible. Okay. So, question is, how are the chances for international students in a local industry to get a job or internship? I guess personal experiences, starting with Reza.
Okay, in my personal opinion, it is very difficult, to be honest, for international students to get experience in the built environment industry in Australia. It is not impossible. So say if you are from a certain country, again, this is my opinion, that the best way for you to get an experience is to contact a company which is from that country to gain the experience.
I see. I'll just make it open. Do Camilla, Matthew, do you have any experiences with either international friends, this field? Yes, no?
Yeah, I agree with Reza. It really depends on if you create a relationship with the owner before arriving in. For the office I was working at, a lot of the international students would contact the boss before starting and create that relationship for them to begin work. So, yeah.
Thanks, Matthew. Can you briefly explain the various career options available for construction management students? Well, okay, Reza.
I think I shared briefly about the project management life cycle earlier in my presentation. So you can work, actually there's so many opportunities. So for me, for example, from my experience, I started on site in a sense as a contract administrator and then site engineer and so on. Or you can start from the office, like you become an estimator or a quantity surveyor. If you want to go earlier in the project lifecycle, then you can be in the property development field. So this is in the planning stage. So basically, you plan what project will be developed. Say if you have an empty land, then if as a developer, then you need to consider what kind of project to be built on this land, so it will bring the maximum profit for the developer. You can even enter at the last stage of the project life cycle, so in the facility management discipline. After the project is completed, then you come with your team and manage the facility. So I mean, the career options are actually wide ranging. So it depends on your preference where you want to enter the industry.
Yep. Thanks, Reza. Right. Next question. How to be confident as a graduate when applying for jobs? Sometimes the skill sets do not meet all the required criteria. For example, software skills requirement. This is quite open. Reza?
I think, as I said earlier, the interview is very important to differentiate yourself. Well, no other way, just keep practicing. Okay. Even sometimes you can, in a sense, you can guess what will be asked during the interviews, and you prepare the answers beforehand. Well, at least that's what I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to add on to Reza. I think all those skills are really important. There's a lot of the personal and human side to working in office as well. So how you would get into the team and how you fit with the team and what your role would be, I think that plays a real big part of choosing the first role.
Okay. Thanks, Matthew. Question reads, what do you think is the most effective way to find an architectural internship rather than just applying on websites and hoping for a response? Again, I think this can be applied anywhere, but I'll just leave this open. Reza? If this was in a construction sense.
Yeah, I think my opinion is still the same. I mean,
still the same? Yep.
Yeah, keep
yep.
persisting. That is, yeah, to me, there's no other way.
Okay, I see. Any other further input? No. Is it possible to switch and transfer my skills from architecture to construction management? Okay. Reason, Matthew?
Well, it is possible, but yeah, I think you may want to upskill yourself before you, say, for example, if you graduate from the architecture discipline, somehow you want to enter the construction management field, you may want to upskill yourself with some construction management skills before you start applying for jobs. I mean, it doesn't mean you need to do another degree, but you can do short courses. You can do even free certificate for, but you need to show that you have the basic skills to enter the construction industry.
Yep. Cool. Matthew, do you have anything to add, or?
I don't have too much experience in construction management, so yeah, not much to add on that.
Okay, all right. Can I find a job in Australia as an overseas student currently studying Master of Landscape Architecture? How can I get an internship or part-time job?
Yeah, for me, that's the same advice. Again, your document should be proper, but obviously for international students, it will be more challenging to find jobs in Australia. The same advice I said earlier. If you are from a certain country, then contact a person from that country to build your career.
Yep. Okay. If I, an architecture student, am interested in pursuing a research-related career, will taking master's degree instead of honor degree make a big difference? I guess Camille and Riza.
Okay, I'll go first.
Yep.
I think yes, because just kind of on a practical basis, basically honors is kind of a much smaller project than masters. So I guess masters would kind of equip you more with the actual skills that are related with, I guess like better skills related with research. So yes, on that note, yes. But I'm interested to hear what Riza has to say.
Yep.
Okay. I think the person may refer to Master of Philosophy. Okay, if you want to do your PhD, I think you just simply complete your honors should be adequate. But you need to get high honors. So it means honors class 1 or honors class 2 division 1. If you are not able to get this one, then yeah, of course you need to do your Master of Philosophy first before you do your PhD. But I think in my opinion, you need to choose either one. And in my view, if you can do very well in your honors, I think that should be enough.
Wait, if I can just ask, I think honors is optional, if I'm correct. Honors is optional. You can go straight to masters. I think that's where the student's coming from.
Oh, I see.
Because
okay,
that sounds about right. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, again, if your dreams is to do your PhD, in my opinion, the same thing. It should be you should do your honors degree and get honors class 1, and then you can continue with your PhD. But that answer, I don't know the requirement of architecture in Australia, whether you need to have undergraduate and then Master of Architecture. I don't know about that one. So my answer is constrained by your desire to do a PhD in the future.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Riza. How would you go about networking and communicating with professionals in your field of interest as a student? Again, just an open question. So, Riza?
I think sometimes, like PESA, they organize events where industry people can come. I think that's a good starting point to build your connections. And there are still many events, professional events out there as well. Say, for example, for me, I'm a member of Australian Institute of Building and the Chartered Institute of Building as well. Sometimes they have some professional events. So I joined those events to build my networks.
Cool. Would you recommend working in industry first or going straight for master's studies after completion of the bachelor's degree in architecture? I think we kind of touched on this, but I'll hand this over again.
Well, yeah, I think we kind of answer this one. My answer is it's good if you can do your if you can work first before you do your masters. But again, I think Matthew gave a good advice. It depends on your personal preference as well.
Yep, agree. Do you interact with people from other disciplines, for example, planners, engineers, lawyers, in your professional employment?
Big yes. I mean, we don't live in isolation, so yes, especially in the construction industry, just that there's so many people involved. So people management, relationship management are super important.
Yep. Yep. Just go.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
That's all right. I don't need. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you have anything to add? That's fine. If you.
Oh no, I think I was just gonna say that, like, I guess with research anyway, it really depends on what your interests are. So I guess because I personally have very broad interests, so like, I kind of also love reading about philosophy and theology and everything. So I tend to go to like conferences on that or like talks on that when I see them happening. And I guess even within my network of friends, you know, like if I can think about my academic friends, you know, I have people who have studied anything from like political theory to like clinical psychology to history and so forth. So I think having in research anyway, I think having a broad range of friends who are in diverse fields is really helpful for you. So yeah.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Camilla. What's the first step into taking on an academia research-related role? Are there internships for this? Well, this was covered in the slides, but just a brief answer. Reza?
Well, complete your research degree.
Good. Thanks, Reza.
Brief answer. There is no internship.
Okay, good, perfect.
Oh, I was going to add something. I mean, on a bachelor's level, you know, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think if you're in third year, you can have an opportunity to tutor. So I think like even in kind of say like, you know, we've been talking about developing the soft skills in order to equip you to be able to do what you want to do. Like even starting early where like, say, for example, if you're in bachelor and, you know, you happen to do really well in first year units, try to see if you can get opportunities to tutor, because that will, I guess, give you some of the skills that are required to be an academic. So.
Yep. Thanks, Camilla. Well, this question, can you explain on-site roles versus office roles in construction management? Well, Reza.
There's so many roles in the construction industry. I'll just give some examples. So on-site roles, I mean, if you become site managers, construction managers, site supervisors, site engineers, so you manage the process on site. You manage the work of the subcontractors on site. I mean, it's maybe not on site all the time, but you need to be in the site office to manage the process. The office roles, I think from my experience when I became a project engineer, so I was based in the head office. So I managed the design process with the project manager. So I liaised with the designers and the clients. And then if you become a quantity surveyor or estimator, then it means you will work in the head office as well. So you receive the drawings from the designers. And then based on the drawings, you will take the quantity and then estimate the price for completing the project based on the drawings. But I mean, there's so many on-site and office roles in the construction industries. Those are just some simple examples.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Reza. I just want to let everyone know we were supposed to finish up at 7:30, but I'll probably go through the last 3 questions and then we'll end it there. So, question reads, how important are the following: LinkedIn, CV, resume, cover letter, academic transcript in applying for any built environment role?
If you are a fresh graduate, your CV, your cover letter, and transcripts are very important. LinkedIn, yes, but maybe not so comparing to the 3 documents you mentioned here.
Yep. Perfect. I'll just skip to this question. What skill, looking back, would you want to have worked harder at developing, knowing what you know now, working in the industry? I think this is a good question that all 3 of you can answer.
Networking and building relationship with people management.
Perfect. Camille?
Yeah, I completely agree with Reza. Like, I think when I was doing my first degrees in UWA, I used to be kind of quite awkward and didn't really talk to people. And I kind of wish that I did that, and I wish I built those relationships. So I think that's the main thing.
Yep, Matthew?
I'd say working on yourself and developing on your character, and just try to really build yourself and be organized. I think that's what I'll do.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we do have more than 20 questions left, but I think we'll just end off on yeah, sorry guys, like I didn't know there was this many questions, but I've just picked this one just to end off. Is it possible to pursue a mixture of teaching, research, and working in practice, and how would it work? Reza.
It is possible. From my experience, I started in the construction industry, and then now I'm a full-time academic staff in the faculty. But at the same time, I still maintain my relationship with people in the industry for my research and for my teaching. And I think even some of the academic staff also have their own business outside the universities. So yes, it is possible to mix those aspects in your career.
Thanks, Rita. Camilla, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I guess kind of similar, but I suppose from my experience, I do know of people who do all three. It is very hectic though, I guess on a kind of just a personal level, you know, like it takes a lot to balance all three. So just be prepared if you do want to do that. But I do know that there are architecture firms who do promote that in their culture. So, you know, certain firms where, say, for example, the director might be really passionate about research, they may encourage their own staff to then go off teaching and so forth. And I know some of those firms. So I think sometimes it also depends on whether you also kind of find a firm that's supportive of that. Because I think the other thing is that some firms won't necessarily let you take that time off to be able to teach, to be able to research. So there's a few kind of factors and complexities that you need to consider there.
Okay. Thanks, Camilla. And I know that there's more than 20 questions left, but unfortunately I'll end it here. Thank you all for attending, but for the students, I know that all the questions have been unanswered, but we hope to answer these questions in a later session, and we'll email you all the details. But first and foremost, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude and for Reza and Camilla and Matthew for spending their time to present to all our built environment students. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the students that have attended. So I'll just have to end it here. Thanks everyone for attending our Built Environment Careers Development Center. So, thank you. Thanks, Reza. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks, Camilla.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Thanks for organizing.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.